All right, good afternoon, everybody, and this is Kim with People of Color Beyond Faith, and we thank you for joining us today. We're running a few minutes late, so please bear with us. Our apologies. Today we are presenting Black Skeptics Chicago, and I'm really excited about this today. And we have Frank Anderson and Reginald Joyner with us, and we'll be talking about Black Skeptics Chicago. We'll be talking about free thought, atheism, so on and so forth. But we just wanted to give you a brief reminder. October 11th and 12th of this year, we will be holding our first annual conference titled Moving Social Justice. Again, we'll have our Moving Social Justice conference October 11th and 12th of this year. It will be held at CFI Los Angeles. Registration is $40 and is $25 for students. All of that information can be found on our Facebook page. So if you look for People of Color Beyond Faith on Facebook, it has the links. And so we're looking forward to seeing you. We have an outstanding guest list. So, we're going to have Dr. Hutchinson, Dr. Penn, we're going to have Donald Wright there, Raina Rhodes, Meredith Boese. We just have a line of A.J. Johnson. So don't miss it. It's going to be a really good time, and we're looking forward to seeing you there, and we just appreciate it. And for the month of July, we featured a few groups of the Black groups that we've met throughout the years, and we're going to be featuring more groups throughout the rest of the year because we want you all to get to know who's out there and to also, again, reiterate that you're not alone. So we appreciate you. We appreciate your support. We appreciate everything that, the words of encouragement. And so without further ado, I would like to present a couple of members of Black Skeptics Chicago. And we will start with Frank. And Frank is the current president of Black Skeptics Chicago. He took over the beginning of this year. So welcome and congratulations, Frank. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and when you came to your non-belief? Hey, Frank, we're having a hard time hearing you, dear. Reggie, can you hear Frank?
I cannot hear Frank.
I can't hear Frank either. Well, Reggie, what, are you there, Frank? Can you?
Take the headsets completely off. How's that? Is that better? Is that better?
Yeah, that's much better.
Okay.
Sorry about that. Yes.
No problem. I'll take the headsets off. All right. Well, I'll start over again. All right. My grandfather was a pastor. I attended Catholic school for 12 years. I guess within my family, I was exposed to a lot of different types of religions: Jehovah's Witness, Islamic, Buddhist, you name it. Well, some forms of Buddhism, I guess, which has some forms of religious element in it. So I've been exposed to that for many, many years. Now, I came to my non-belief somewhere back in college when I was around, say, 18, 19, 20 years of age. I happened to have a professor, two professors, African-American professors, who were actually atheists at the time, and also one of my best friends. And back during those times, I had the opportunity to ask a lot of questions, do a lot of research and stuff along those lines. And it kind of gradually grew on me. It took me a few years. And, and I really can't pinpoint the date, but I would say it would probably been somewhere in the late 70s, early 80s, and I came to my non-belief.
Okay, excellent, excellent. And now that you're part of the free thought community, Frank, tell us about your experiences.
The experiences have been kind of interesting. At first, when I first got into this way back in the late 70s, early 80s, it was kind of a hush-hush type thing in our community. It was considered to be kind of on the side of crazy if you did not have a belief system. It was not until, say, recent, when I say recent, because I guess I'm a little older than a lot of people out there. When I say recent, I mean like the mid '90s, where I really, really felt comfortable talking about it and coming out and really talking about it, and where I felt a lot more comfortable, I should say. Um, Today, with our Chicago organization, we have over 155 people on our meetup group, and so it's a lot easier and a lot more acceptable to come out and say it, that you're a non-believer and stuff along those lines. People in my family know I'm not hiding it anymore. Everyone knows. Just to give an example, I was down in Atlanta last weekend, and everyone in my family knows. It was an incident that came up at the family reunion where some preacher got up and started preaching, and everybody turned around and they looked at me as a form of being respectful, so to speak. In other words, they did not want to offend me. As a matter of fact, I even had a cousin actually get up and defend people who happen to not believe in Jesus Christ or any other religion. So at first it was a struggle, but I say now it's a lot better than what it used to be, and especially with my family, the Chicago Black Skeptics, it really makes it a lot easier.
Excellent, excellent. And Reginald, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and tell us about your experiences as being a non-believer?
Okay. I've never been a believer. I recognize that most people who are non-believers now were believers at one point, and I never was. And I thought about it as to why that occurred. And the only thing I remember was the stories that they'd say, there is a good God. But none of the stories were good. So I was left with the idea that the adults were lying or something was wrong, but that couldn't be true because you don't go around killing people if you're good. That just didn't make any sense. And I really didn't think much of it, other than having been forced to go to it as a kid after that time period, until after the 9/11 events, at which point I was forced to actually think about the impact religion actually has on our communities and our society. It was at that point that I did a intensive study of religion and the history and the details and the cognitive effects and the socialization process of people in general. And what I found was rather, just kind of sad, because for the most part, most people really don't examine what they think or why they think it. They tend to accept more of whatever's said around them as opposed to actually thinking about it. And that state of our existence seems to be a legacy that we're going to be struggling with for a very long time. Because even with the passing of religion at some point in the future, we'll still be subject to a variety of other notions because we just don't tend to think about much beyond what we really have to, but we tend to accept more than we think.
That's true.
I'll leave it
And
at that for the moment.
well, no, because I'm gonna take it there. So and that's true. And that's why we challenge people to think for themselves, and we challenge them to utilize critical thinking skills. And even within the atheist community, I've seen some situations and some incidents, and I stress the people to utilize critical thinking in every area of their lives, not just when it comes down to religion. So going back to something that you stated a minute ago, Reginald, in which you were saying that people were just blindly following along, going along, and not necessarily thinking about it, would you say that many people in many communities of color that follow religion, would you say that they're in a state of arrested development?
Unfortunately, yes. Because if you actually sit down and ask whether something makes sense, you'll start to see either a moment of shock or complete puzzlement. Just that, what are you asking me? That doesn't make any sense to even ask that question, kind of thing. When they're confronted with, this is what it says, do you think that's so? And yet at the same time, they'll claim that it is so without having actually read it. And I'm like, we need to do better than this. You know, one can sell you anything as if it were true if you're not willing to check it out. And most of us just don't. So in our communities, it's, if you dare say, and I do emphasize the word dare say because you usually get jumped on right now, if you say that it does not make sense, everyone will come up with all kinds of reasons, but none of those attach to reality.
Exactly. And Frank, you've been around for a while, and I know sometimes when we're texting on or talking on the telephone, you have your interactions on the train. So you kind of interacted with a lot of different people of a lot of different faiths in different situations. And what is your assessment of where we stand, and how do you see the future of people of color in faith communities? Where do you see any advancements or any type of awakening in the next few years? Do you see it happening? We can't hear you, Frank. Hold on a second. Frank, unmute yourself, dear.
All right, is that better?
There you go. That's better.
All right, I'm gonna learn this eventually. Okay. The question is, repeat the question one more time so we'll get started here.
Okay, so I said you have these different conversations on the train and other places with people, and you talk to a lot of people of many different faiths and cultures and what have you. And basically, I was saying, what is your assessment of where we stand, and where do you see us in a few years as far as people of color in the faith community and the grand awakening and the growth of free thought?
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. First of all, I would say I think we're in believe it or not, as bad as it looks today compared to where it used to look then, we're in a lot better shape than what we were before. Just the example of the freedom that I have where I can say the word atheist, where I can sit up as we're doing this interview in my backyard within listening distance and say that I'm an atheist. I can tell you back in 1980, this would not have been possible to say this without someone in my family looking at me as being strange or something along those lines, or calling a psychiatric doctor or whatever, a psychologist. So I think we've come a long ways, and if you want to believe some of the stats that you hear from different organizations, we've come a long ways, even people of color. Numbers upwards from, I don't know, from 15, 20% in our community to even up to 30% on college campuses. That's a heck of a lot better than what it was back in the late 70s, early 80s when I first came to the State of Reason. So I'm optimistic about the future, and I can tell you, being the age I am now, and looking way back at that time, I never dreamed that we would be at this stage, at this point of the game. So I'm optimistic.
Excellent, excellent. And what advice would you give to some of our younger viewers? Because we do have young people that view these webcasts and listen to the podcast. Not only our younger viewers, but also the people who aren't out, that aren't able to attend meetings, that aren't able to come out with their non-belief. What advice would you give to those two groups?
Well, be smart, I guess, about how you come out. In those terms, if you can come out, do come out, because as you come out, you'll bring other ones out. So don't be afraid to come out if you can, but if it's a situation where it could be possibly hurting your job or something like that, or maybe if you're still kind of at home working under your mom or your father's under your parents' rule, you have to kind of be smart about it. I have a friend of the family now that I know, that's a kid that's 16 years old, who comes from a very traditional Catholic background. They don't believe that stuff anymore, but yet I would tell that young man and to not say anything at this point. You still have to depend on your mom and dad. You love your mom and dad, but yet you still got to be your own person. So I would just say, if you can come out, come out. Don't be afraid to come out. If you can't come out for whatever political reasons within your own household, just be smart about it. And it's getting there. We're going to get there. I really believe we're going to get there.
Okay, and what about the people who aren't out? They're not able to come out freely. And we have a lot of older people, that are non-believer. I mean, you've seen that at some of our meetings. I've been surprised at some of the people that have shown up. And, some of them are older and they weren't able to come out, and some still aren't able to come out. What would you say to them?
What I would say to them, those type of people need to get around people like us who feel comfortable to come out. We can work along with them to find out, well, why do you feel that you can't come out? And you kind of work along with them, and find out what the reasoning is, and encourage them that it is okay to come out. I think sometimes you do get strength in numbers. Okay, there are strength in numbers, and if they need to come and unwind and talk about it and let their hair down, they need to come out to one of our meetings. We try to meet at least once a month, and sometimes even twice a month with different activities. So come on out. We're normal people like anybody else. We like families. We like good education. We want to get the best education for our communities. We want the best schools for our communities. We're no different than anybody else. So don't be afraid to come out. It's normal. It's normal. Matter of fact, in my opinion, I think it's even more normal for us than some of the other people.
So there you go. Exactly. And for those that are interested, you can find Black Skeptics Chicago on Meetup. So you can go and join our Meetup page, and I'll put that information in the YouTube thing a little bit later in the description. Reginald, can you give some advice to some of the younger people out there? Go ahead.
Well, as it stands right now, I grant that your circumstances may not make coming out conducive to your life. But if you do come out, ever anyone comes out, my recommendation is that they speak of what it is that they value as part of that process. The challenge that people have with relating to others is finding a point of commonality. And without a point of commonality, they feel concerned that there's no linkage to you as a person. And to present the idea that you value the well-being of people, as an example, or a particular cause or particular social notions that you care about, is a point of linkage that others can relate to. And to a great degree, religion has been used as a means to create a sense of linkage to other people. And just by saying what you care about is a way to create that linkage as well.
Excellent. Yes, that's true. And we've talked about how it's a social construct, and that's what makes the church so powerful, is because we can all come together. There is a linkage, there is, this kindred thread that many of us share. And, the origination of the church, when it first started, and I've done shows on this, and I was talking about, Black Christians and why Christianity has been so strong and so utilized so much in our communities, because it gave us a sense of hope. It allowed and helped us to survive the dire circumstances, which we were living under. So I kind of understand what's happening and why people gather together, and why a lot of Black Christians in particular, why they cover each other, why they shield each other, because in many cases Black Christianity was the only thing that was shielding us from white supremacy. then and even now to a certain degree. So, it's kind of complicated, but I understand. But that's one of the reasons why we're, moving forward and we're stepping out into society and, letting it be known that we're out, we're non believers, we're not here to proselytize or anti proselytize, but we're here to help. And this brings in the social justice component. And Frank, what value do you see in us going forth into the communities and bringing forth social justice?
I think it's very valuable for us to go into the communities to push for social justice, and this is not nothing that's new. This is something we've done before in the past. I mean, if we study our history and we go back and we look at our history, we'll find that there's a lot of people like us that was involved in the civil rights movement. I know you and I have talked about this a lot, Kim, and I've learned a lot from you and Reggie actually on this. But for example, for those people that's listening, people like Asa Philip Randolph, Bayard Rustin. These are two people that were Dr. King's right-hand men in the civil rights struggle. So, I mean, without those two guys, maybe the civil rights would have not gotten as far as it did. You go back and you look at our history, W. Du Bois, the founder of the NAACP. I mean, so this is not something that's new in terms of activism for African Americans as free thinkers. So this is nothing new at all, and I think it's about educating too and letting people know that. I mean, just to give you an example, a few years ago I was at a gathering, a family gathering, and we were talking about things. And I have a lot of, I think, smart people per se, if you want to say, at least in terms of the law. I have a lot of lawyers in my family, but they didn't realize that some of the things that Asa Philip Randolph did. They actually challenged me until we started Googling it and looked it up. I told them about the situation with the 1941 possible potential march on Washington, which Asa Philip Randolph put together. They didn't know that. And so I think what we have to do is we have to go about educating our community about these things and letting them know that we are part of this movement as well. I don't know if I answered the question.
No, you answered it perfectly, and you're exactly right. And that's why we have to get out here. We have to educate people because the civil rights movement was a secular movement. And a lot of people don't seem to understand that. And the civil rights movement predates Martin Luther King. According to some people, including myself, after doing much research, civil rights movement started in slavery. That's why I want to do a three-part series on that. But a lot of people don't understand that the only reason why the Bible was introduced into that particular phase of the civil rights movement is because the white nationalists were using Bible scriptures to justify Jim Crow, to justify the mistreatment, maltreatment of people of color, because it wasn't just black people that were being lynched. We had Italians that were being lynched, we had Filipinos that were being lynched, a number of other people. And this is one of the reasons why, and a lot of people aren't familiar with this, but a lot of other cultures, they joined up with us. You got to go back and read some information about the Young Lords, which was the Puerto Rican version based here in Chicago, which expanded to New York. Geraldo Rivera was their lawyer in New York. And you have to go and learn about Fred Ho and a bunch of other, Pan-Asians and people that joined up that had their own version of radical humanism. So, our history is very long. Go back and learn about Hubert Henry Harrison. Go back and learn about Joel Augustus Rogers and John G. Jackson. It's just a number of people. It is a very rich history. And moving forward into the civil rights movement, a lot of people don't realize that I believe it was 5% or less of the black churches welcomed Dr. King because they wanted the status quo and they felt that he was a troublemaker and they didn't want an outsider coming in telling them how to conduct business. So again, it's about putting this in the proper historical context. And Reggie, can you give us some of your insight on this?
Well, the challenge that you're right, our ignorance of the involvement of a variety of people and processes has caused us a great deal of, well, just misdirected appreciation for how things are set up. there are, how can I put this? There are a lot of forces that tend to hijack the works of others when it's a collaborative effort, each one adding something to the totality. And this insistence that it's all about this one person, all about this one group, tends to diminish all the other factors involved. The idea of let's actually just take slavery. It has always amazed me that people won't actually look at the fact that slavery is actually supported in the Bible and call slavery a bad thing, and simultaneously will suggest that the directive of such wasn't a bad thing. There is a failure to, and it's really important that we start taking time to give consideration to everybody and everything that's involved. Take it away, Kim.
Exactly. We have to, take all of that. Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, we have to take all of that into consideration. That that there are a number of people that have basically contributed to the civil rights movement, and also, yes, that is correct. There are a number of different people and groups that will try to usurp the civil rights movement and the sacrifices that were made, the lives that were lost. And basically, the civil rights movement was the most successful civil movement against oppression. And many other movements that have come subsequent to that have based itself off of the strategies of the civil rights movement. And, that's been one of the points of contention in many interactions because the gay rights movement is calling itself a civil rights movement, and so is certain aspects of the atheist community and movement. They're calling themselves a civil rights movement, and they don't understand why many black people take offense to that. We take umbrage with that for the simple fact that we understand that you're fighting for civil rights. However, in many cases, especially with the gay community as well as with the atheist community, we have a number of instances of racism that has not been addressed, that won't be acknowledged. As a matter of fact, in the atheist community, when we bring up racism, and for the most part, is ignored. And then they try to quote Morgan Freeman to us and say, well, if you just stop talking about it, it will go away. And you have people in the gay community as well as the atheist community that are espousing this color blindness in this post-racial America. And we are nowhere near a post-racial America. I mean, just look at what they've taken President Obama through. Look at what we're dealing with, where you have people claiming that they're standing their ground and shooting, people out in the street, people of color, just in cold blood. And the rise of these militias and nationalist groups, it's amazing. So I guess my question to Frank would be, um, in regards to the civil rights movement and where we stand now, because it's time for a new phase of the civil rights movement. And unfortunately for Christians, many, Christians of color in this community, they're waiting for some type of messianic person or male or figure to come in to usher in this new civil rights movement. And what they don't understand is that it's always been secular, and this new phase will be secular as well. It will be us who get out here and protest alongside of many Christians of color. So we have to build that infrastructure. We have to build that agenda. We have to have an agenda. So I guess my question to Frank would be, do you see us being able to come together collectively and work together to bring in another civil rights movement to get out here and protest and march for social justice.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, if the Supreme Court is going to force us into that situation with them voting down, striking down, what was the fifth article within the Civil Rights Act, when they struck that down, with some of the other decisions that they're coming down with the Supreme Court, we have to do something about the situation here. The next civil rights movement will be, again, led by the free thought community. It's no more getting on your hands and knees and praying and singing and trying to get this type of thing. We got to get out there and we got to do things. So it's going to be more than about protest. We're going to have to learn how to try to lobby with other groups to try to get certain things passed, because the Supreme Court that we have right now is not in our best interest. And so we have to find ways of getting out there and getting involved in the community. I even think to a point we may have to run for political office, whereas I know it was taboo at one time for atheists or free thinkers to run for office. We may have to even think about doing that, because we have to get in there and we have to change legislation for this next civil rights movement, because we're in a dire straits in a lot of situations. I mean, you look at. I think one of the things with President Obama's administration, what it did was it exposed this country to how far we haven't come. It showed, on one hand, it showed us we've come a long way in terms of electing an African American president, but also it showed us how far we have not traveled. So I think through our community, we're going to have to take the lead in this, as we did before. And it's not going to be one person this is going to lead to. It's going to be a collective effort. I think one of the problems with I guess from the Christians' point of view, it's the civil rights movement. It was one person in their mindset. It was Dr. King. Once he was gone, they were in disarray. You looked at how Jesse and Abernathy and all these other leaders all did the old Alexander Haig, I'm in charge type thing, and really all they did was run in quicksand. So I think it's important that we get out there, we get involved in our community, we force our legislators to act and work on issues on our behalf. I think that's the only way we can get this done. Again, we have no support right now with that Supreme Court. Unless there was some way one of these guys to step down, it's always going to be a 5-4 vote split going in the opposite direction.
Exactly, and you're correct about the Voting Rights Act, where they struck down Section 5, and right now they're hammering away at Section 2. That is going to be the next section that gets struck down. And when Section 2 is struck down, we're just, we're already, as you said, facing dire straits, and dealing in dire straits is going to get even worse. And yes, you're correct about, the politics being local, finding out who your local politicians are on, your mayor, your aldermen, your state representatives, your state senators, and being able to push them or lobby them to change public policies, because a lot of people aren't really aware or don't really realize that many groups of color are oppressed due to some of the public policies that are on the books. And when you hear a lot of these groups, a lot of these Tea Partiers, a lot of these libertarians and right-wing conservatives, when you hear them talking about pushing it back down to the state and they want states' rights, this is so that they can enforce discrimination on the state level, because what happens is the power and the money is pushed down from the federal level to the state level, and then they are able to administer those programs, which means they can pick and choose whoever they want to administer those funds to. And again, when I did the show talking about affirmative action, I was showing that when they first started giving out the GI loans in the state of Mississippi, well over 3,000 white veterans were able to receive the GI loans for their homes, whereas it was only 2 or 3 blacks. So we've been kept out of that particular a number of policies, a number of programs, because of discrimination. And so, it's just important for people to understand and realize that. And I know Reginald wanted to follow up and answer this question. Go ahead, Reggie. You're on mute, Reginald. We can't hear you.
I apologize, missed that. One of our challenges is to address what do we mean when we say civil rights? Because the moment you fail to define your terms as to what it is that you mean, what it is that you wish to obtain, what issues are present that needs to be addressed, one is failed to actually get the support they may otherwise be able to get.
Mm. Mm.
That's true. That's true. You have to specify.
Looking at
You
their
have
struggle
to.
as a civil rights. Yet we failed to actually get the point about what civil rights actually means. Because it means not just my group, not just my interests, but everyone's interests. And the moment we make it confined to just me, we're setting
All right, Reggie, we can't hear you over here. Sorry. I think you muted again. But when he was talking about setting an interest, defining it so that it's inclusive, that is absolutely correct. Civil rights is for everyone. Civil rights is for everyone. And again, when we were talking about the LGBTQ community, there were certain rights that they were being denied. Even with the atheist community, there are certain rights that they are being denied as well. And so they are entitled to civil rights also. But again, when I was speaking earlier, I was talking about people attempting to usurp the civil rights movement as it is currently defined as moving people of color out of oppression, fighting for civil rights, fighting for equality for people of color. And black people weren't the only ones that benefited from that. Latinos, Asians, indigenous people, so on and so forth. They all benefited in some way from that. But again, a lot of the gains that we made during the civil rights movement, a lot of those gains have been lost plus some, which is why we're stating that there needs to be a new phase of the civil rights movement. We need to pick it back up and this time stay the course, because Frank is correct. When Martin Luther King Jr. died, basically it was, people scattered. There needs to be more than one person in a leadership type of position. It doesn't need to be about one particular person, because unfortunately, a lot of Christians are under the misconception that Martin Luther King was out there to espouse the gospel as a civil rights, leader, and that is not the truth. Reggie, are you back? Can we hear you?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you
Can you
now.
hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Beautiful. Well, the civil rights is one piece, but there's also the issue of social justice. And the idea that you're free, yet you're not able to capitalize on that freedom, is a problem to the claim of being free. And the whole economics of it are also something that needs to be addressed, because they are intricately they're related in a way that you cannot untie them. They're Unfortunately, this doesn't get a lot of attention, and as a consequence, libertarian ideals of you are responsible for your plight tends to be the message that's sent, when in fact every one of us is a product of a collective effort, and the degree to which any one of us is shortchanged on the collective effort for our development is also the degree to which we are less in our society. Hello?
Yes, I can hear you. Frank, you're on mute, dear. Unmute yourself, Frank. Can you hear me? Yeah, and I agree what you're saying. Basically, yeah, we have to define that because the empowerment is part of it. It is intertwined, and we do have to address how it is about the financial aspect of it. I mean, that's what it all boils down to. That empowerment is also about economic empowerment, not only just words, but also being able to utilize the same type of advantages and privileges that are given to other groups. So, Frank, what were you about to say?
I was going to say, and maybe you guys have already said or said something along those lines. Would you say the current civil rights is more or less like a human rights type issue now, in terms of, you know, in terms of not necessarily, well, there are certain things that we can pretty much go out and vote, we can pretty much get on the buses and things along those lines, but we still may not be guaranteed to have adequate health care, as you can see with the arguments on Congress going back and forth with the Affordable Health Care Act, or Obamacare, if you want to call it that. You see some of the problems within our school systems, where our school systems are lacking way behind and stuff along those lines. You can see in the inner city where you have a lot of gang problems and stuff like that. So would you say the problem is more of a human rights issue versus a civil rights, or maybe some combination of both? You guys hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. No, I definitely would say
They're
it's more along the
interconnected.
lines of a human rights issue. Exactly, exactly, exactly. They're definitely interconnected. And so let's talk about the Affordable Care Act. Let's talk about Obamacare, because the lengths to which the Republican Party is going to strike that down. They're calling it reparations. They're calling some of the decisions that Secretary Holder is making, as far as the disparities in sentencing laws and the legalization of marijuana, and possibly commuting some sentences of people. There are some people that receive life sentences for selling a dime bag of weed. And so, they're just trying to level the playing field. They're trying to restore voting rights for people that have, gone to prison for whatever reason. And also, I hope that they're working on this, but restoring people who have gone to prison, restoring their rights to be able to receive financial aid to go back to school. So, what would be your thoughts on that in particular? Let's start with Reggie this time.
Well, let's face it. As we build more and more people, and I say build as in make it such that they cannot rejoin society, we're actually building a society that's against our existing society, which demands that we're going to have a criminal element, because they don't have an option to do anything other than be criminals. I don't see the sense in saying that we want you to be decent, at the same time making sure that they cannot be, because every turn that they try to make a go at a decent living, they can't get a job due to a record. They can't get better education due to a record. What do you expect these people to do if they cannot rejoin society? It's a recipe to make sure that it stays, well, actually gets worse, not just stays, because as you add more people, they're not going to just not live. They're going to live. They're just going to be a problem because they cannot do any better than they're doing.
Exactly. And Frank?
Yeah, I mean, Alexander, the new Jim Crow. Michelle Alexander's book touch on a lot of those issues, and we've all been affected by that in some fashion. I know we all have family members somewhere. I have a family member that's in the penal system, and to give you an example, had to go back to jail. He had to go back to jail because he couldn't pay his fees back to the court systems. Well, he couldn't get a job because he has a criminal record. So it's a cyclical thing, and I think we need to have legislation that once certain types of crimes have passed on, certain things need to be expunged from their records. Okay, once you've paid your so-called due to society, They should be able to get back out there and get back into the working world without any kind of discrimination. Landlords should also be held accountable as well in terms of letting them come into their apartment complex as long as they're able to pay their rent. So all these types of things. They also should be able to go to school. They also should be able to go out and get loans as well, just like any other American. We all make mistakes. Mistakes have been made by all of our past presidents, if you want to call it a mistake. George Bush, Obama, all smoked weed at one time or did drugs, Bill Clinton. But they were able to go to the highest office in this land. So if we can let them get to the highest office of the land, why not clear up some of these mineral type crimes like that, so these kids and these young adults can get back out there in the working environment. We all made mistakes in the past before, and some of these mistakes should be forgiven.
Exactly, and that's the reason why when I talk about these things, I'm going to tie it in with what we said earlier about economic empowerment. And basically, and I'm going to come from a different angle here, in Michelle Alexander's book, she talks about how many of these prisons are privately held prisons. And a lot of people don't realize that you have some of these, prison industrial complex corporations that are on the stock market. You can buy stock in it. And it's really interesting how all of that's set up. A lot of people aren't aware because there is a tie between immigration and the prison system, because a lot of people don't realize is that one of the largest airline, the most profitable airline out there is not one that you and I can book a ticket on. It is the one that is transporting these immigrants back to their countries once they're deported from America. And with these prison systems, these private prison systems, they have contracts with these states. And with that, in the contracts, it's stipulated that the state has to supply so many prisoners and fill so many beds. And if those beds are not filled, the state still has to pay. So, I want people, there's a profit in poverty. There's a profit in crime. And, we're trying to get to it last week on the show, but we got stuck on something else. But there is a profit in it, and there are people who profit from your not being able to go out and maintain a positive living. Reggie, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, here's the thing. All the things that we've discussed at this point have a backdrop that everybody should become aware of. There's an ideological perspective about which way you decide. If you feel that people in general deserve to be part of society and deserve to be forgiven so that they can be, then one is inclined to want more programs that will allow them to reintegrate into society. If you think that everything about once you screw up, you should be forever punished, then you're against many of the programs. And this mindset is one of the things that we have to address as part of our, because for the people who are advocating permanent punishment, we need to reach them to get them to understand that permanent punishment results in permanent misery for us all. Kim?
That's true. That's true. Yes. And have you ever paid attention to the correlation there? With some religious people, they feel that if you quote unquote sin, which they consider committing a crime in certain respects are a sin, you're going to go to hell and spend there a lifetime, and how that correlates with them wanting people to pay a lifetime for mistakes that they have made. It's really interesting because you see a lot of believers that are for the death penalty. You see a lot of believers that are for harsher sentencing and things of that nature. So, I always sit back and I do a comparative analysis. I look at these things and I try to look at it from a number of different perspectives. And so I just, kind of find it interesting when I sit back and think about these things, because sometimes I'm like, I never thought about it like that. So it just kind of it rings a bell, and it's interesting. But yeah, we have to start educating people. We have to, bring the information out, because I read a study, and I posted this about 6, 7 months ago, in which it said, we was talking about the income gap, the wealth inequality gap, and it was stating that it would be cheaper for the United States to level the playing field and close that gap than to keep that gap open is actually costing us more money to keep the wealth gap open. And so I guess my question, and we'll start with Reggie with this, how do you see that? Do you believe that could possibly be true? And why would they not want to close that gap?
Well, again, this is quietly an ideological perspective, because the idea of closing the gap requires that you understand it as being somehow wrong. If you accept the idea that it's okay that we have poor people, it's okay that people have no access to doing better, then there's nothing to be said that needs to be corrected. But if you actually care that there are people who are incapable of doing better because they don't have the means to get better education, they're disbarred from society in a variety of ways, so that better is not really an option, then it changes the equation. So from my standpoint, the wealth gap is in part a symbol of a disparity of thought about how things and what is wrong. If you don't care that we can spend another billion on this, but we're not going to fund education, there's something wrong, at least from my perspective, about priorities. Because for every person who is not educated, for every person who is not capable of being part of society, that's one more person who is an expense to the society. It costs us money every time we have somebody who's incapable of doing for themselves, or is assaulting other people because they couldn't get what they needed on their own. It's
Exactly.
the ignorance involved. Go on, Kim.
Oh, no, I was just saying exactly. I agree with you. Go ahead if you have more.
Well, no, but this is the framing. See, if you actually listen to libertarians, they will speak of the world as each one of us is totally responsible for ourselves. It makes it, their view makes it difficult to see the interlinkages that every one of us does for the good of the whole. And the idea that we are solely responsible for ourselves is a lie, given that every one of us is using information based upon the legacy of all the people that came before us in order to utilize the technology, in order to develop the new ideas, in order to do virtually everything in our society. It was built on the backs of other people who came before us. And to ignore that fact is to dismiss a whole realm of power that the group information base gives to each one of us. On you, Kim.
All right. And Frank, please jump in.
Yeah, I guess going back, if you look at the whole situation here, the people that's in charge, that's in control of this country right now, why would they want to change anything? I mean, this human, is it? I mean, I guess you can argue the fact is human nature is to be selfish or to share. I mean, I don't know. But if you look at the people that's in control, they have everything. Why would they want to share? I mean, so you look at the current conservative movement in this country on the right side. They don't care about welfare programs. They don't care if every person in Chicago gets arrested. Okay, so how do you make someone understand, like what Reggie was saying? How do you make them understand that by helping everyone, you're helping yourself as well? I don't know. I don't know how you go about encouraging people to do that. I don't know.
Oh yeah, for someone like that, it's a win-win situation because even if the people who are being imprisoned or on probation or what have you, they still make money on it.
Yes.
And that's what people don't seem to understand. Like with the stock market, you can make money when the stock market is tanking. If you understand how to short the stocks. And I mean, so there is money in poverty, there's money in crime, there is money in all of that. And I'm not talking about the people that are being affected personally, but the people that are betting on the fact that you're going to go back to jail, that you're going to go, the recidivism rate, filling those bids, and even with the immigration issues that we're having, they're going to put them on those planes. And this is a privately owned airline that they're making billions and billions of dollars. The people that house the immigrants that they're sending back to the other countries, they're making money for that. They have them wearing sometimes these uniforms. Somebody is making money from all of that. So it's all tied together. And I agree with both you and Reggie. And it's really interesting. And when you were talking about people not wanting to share and talking about the libertarian stance, we call it white privilege. And and of course they don't want to, necessarily give that up. You have many of them that will fight you tooth and nail about that. And then unfortunately, what I've seen in my interactions, especially in the atheist community, is it turns into an oppression Olympics. Who was the most deprived? So I'm talking about racism. I'll have poor whites or people that claim to be poor whites saying, "Well, I was poor growing up," and I was like, "I was poor and black." And and they don't understand. And there are ways that you can explain it to them that by virtue of them just having white skin, that they have some advantages. I mean, there were polls that came out that showed that many businesses would rather hire a white person with a high school diploma or a GED with several, crimes behind them, as opposed to a black person with a couple of degrees behind them. So it's just interesting that they don't really understand how that works and how it's to their own advantage. And it's really interesting. But again, when Martin Luther King wanted to do the Poor People's Campaign and when he was marching for civil rights, he did include poor whites. So we're not necessarily not including poor whites when we talk about these things because, I do talk about what they've been through and what has happened to them, but just by virtue of having white skin, they have an advantage. Go ahead, Frank.
Yeah. You kind of hit on exactly what I was going to say, the poor people's movement and stuff along those lines. And a lot of times we get divided on silliness, on race, on religion, and politics. And if we go back and we look and see how much we have in common with those folks and we focus on what's in common, I think we can do a whole lot better in this country. We could change this whole country. It's no accident that 50% of the people in this country are not registered to vote. It's no accident that only 50% of the registered voters go out to vote. So, I mean, if we ever get to a point where we can wake up the silent majority, we can put whoever the heck we want to put in office and call it whatever we want to call it. We can call it the Chicago Party or whatever you want to call it. But we have to somehow wake up the silent majority and get them involved. And the powers that be won't let that happen. And they won't let it happen because they divide us through religion. And like I said, through religion and through our skin color.
Exactly. And there's a lot we can do. I mean, with the election of President Obama, that shows that, there are many people that want to move this country forward. We have a lot of progressive, forward-thinking people in this country. And, again, we need to come together and we need to work together. That is why we have this show, People of Color, but also we include, white people who want to be involved as well. We don't exclude any particular person, but we wanted to make this a safe space so that people of color can get together and address these issues. And we do address issues such as homophobia. We do address issues such as sexism, transphobia, ableism, and a number of other things. We do talk about those topics. Sometimes, well, for the most part, we talk about it from a minority perspective because there is an extra hurdle that we have to jump over as being minorities. But Reggie, did you have something that you wanted to add to this conversation?
Um, no, not particularly. Other than tribalism, we tend to bias our decisions for those that we think that we understand, that we feel that we relate to. So a lot of the discrimination is actually a bias for people that we're familiar with, as opposed to an assault against other people. Um, and I grant that's a subtle point, but it is a factor.
Oh yes, most definitely. It's a factor, and we talk about that. I was on a Twitter chat and they were talking about tribalism within the atheist community, and we've all talked about tribalism in the black community. I mean, I believe each community, has that particular mindset to some degree. I mean, Chicago is one of the best examples of that. If you come to Chicago, you can find a certain pocket in Chicago for every ethnic group. We have the Puerto Ricans over here. We have the Polish people over there. We have the Italians here. I mean, and Martin Luther King called Chicago one of the most segregated cities, or the most segregated city in the United States. So tribalism, that's something that we have to overcome, and you're correct, is very subtle. It's like an unspoken type of rule, if you will. And that's one of the reasons why we're trying to combat, these types of things, even in the atheist community. But, it's kind of hard when you're trying to tear it down from within. And especially when you're one of the smaller groups, the minority within the minority, trying to address some of these issues. And again, as we were talking earlier about, white privilege and the status quo, that is something that minorities have been battling against in the majority of the groups that we're involved in, whether it's the LGBTQ community, the atheist community, and a number of other communities that we're involved in. And so it's been really interesting because in addition to fighting for whatever rights we're trying to attain with that group, we're still trying to fight for rights within that group. And I just find it unfortunate in many cases that we still have to prove our humanity, and especially in the atheist community, which is supposed to be enlightened and progressive, that some of the problems that we're dealing with, I was shocked when I came to this community and had to deal with some of these issues that I didn't have to deal with when I was part of the other community. I mean, there were some issues, but not to the extent of what I've had to deal with on this end. But, Frank, in 3 years, where would you like to see Black Skeptics Chicago? What would you like to see us doing?
You said 3 years? I'm sorry, you say 3 years? Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Okay. In 3 years, I would like to see our group quadruple in numbers at least. Secondly, I'd like to see us become more involved in the community in terms of politics and directing some of these politicians into doing the right things for our community. Third, I would like us to get involved with the educational system as well. We have a lot of talented people out there in the free thought community, from doctors, IT, to laborers. We cover the whole spectrum. So we need to go out there and we need to be examples in the community, showing them that it's okay to be an atheist, that atheists are good people, that atheists are leaders, that atheists care about their community. Okay, that the atheists want the best for their community, the best education for their children. So I want us to be more of a voice. I want people to be able to come to us to ask us for advice, because we have the talent to answer some of the outstanding questions.
Excellent, excellent. And Reginald?
I'm with Frank. The biggest point for me, though, it would be the education. Because unfortunately, for better or worse, we're all prisoners of our current level of ignorance. And if we don't address ignorance, we really can't advance. Which, based on everything I've observed, that has been our greatest crippling point in humanity.
And I agree with you both. And that's why we're educating people. That's why we educate ourselves. We educate each other, because we want to see growth within each other. And as I learn more information, I'm like, oh man, this is fantastic. Let me do a show about this and let me send out the links to everybody. And, guys, you got to read about this because there are a lot of things that people do not know. I've been posting links about issues that have been happening around the world. I just posted some links about Black Palestinians. A lot of people don't realize that there were slave revolts in Palestine because they had slaves over there, and that as of now, the Black Palestinians is a very hidden culture. They're there, but they're kind of in the background. And I only mentioned that because of what we're dealing with now with the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And I'm not really going to go into too many details about that because I'm not ready to have that argument with people. But, there are a lot of things that, have been hidden as far as history is concerned. And we're bringing that out. And, a lot of people would disagree with, how I'm going to contextualize this point here. But, with many people of color in the United States, in particular, Black people, because we've been scapegoated for so long, and they continue to scapegoat us. We're dealing with our very own Holocaust. Ever since the New Deal, the Black unemployment rate has been twice that of whites, but before the New Deal, it was on par. So if it was a 4% unemployment rate for whites, it was a 4% unemployment rate for blacks. After the New Deal came into play, then it doubled for blacks, and it has been that way since then. And, again, with a lot of these programs, you'll hear about them saying, talking about entitlement programs, saying that they want to cut off these programs. And there are more white people benefiting from these social programs than black people. And that should say something to the poor whites out there because apparently they don't care about you either, and they convince you to vote against your own interests. And again, we have a lot of racialized politics in this country. Ronald Reagan, built his platform on the welfare queen. And, it's been interesting, how this has come along, but, they are affected as much as we are. And what I want to say to the Christian community in particular, especially the Christian community that calls themselves conservatives and Republicans and vote that way, they don't seem to realize that the Republicans are tricking them. And basically, the Republicans want to take all of these social programs and move them off the federal register and push them down to the churches, knowing that the churches cannot handle that volume nor the issues in the communities. They can help a few people, but when they have the entire communities coming to them for help, they're not going to be able to handle it. And so it's going to fail. And so basically they're going to say then, well, the churches can't handle, these programs, then we don't need to have them. And what I will say to black atheists in particular, or atheists of color in particular, that are espousing a lot of these libertarian claims and attempting to shut down these programs, the people, whether you want to admit it or not, the church has been the focal point of many communities of color. That is where they go to get counseling, albeit is not certified or professional in most cases. That's where they go to get help with their bills. They don't realize it's a federal program, and and the federal government is just renting some space from the church. They just know they go to the church and they get help with their gas and lights. At the end of the month, when they don't have any more food, they can go to the church and get a few bags of food to help stretch them out that last week and a half until they get their paycheck. And, where will they go? what will happen, and that is the reason why I am proposing that, secularists, humanists, get out here and we bring forth an alternative. And basically, we can, utilize and bring forth the same programs out here that the church. We're not trying to compete. We're working alongside, because at the end of the day, it's about humanity. It's about giving back to the community. And so this is why you hear us talking about social justice on a number of different levels. It's because our communities need help. And, as we stated earlier, helping one person, we're really helping all of us. Because at the end of the day, we're all connected. All of these oppressions are interconnected in one way or the other. And so, I just wanted to make sure that, we stress that. And I wanted to give Frank a chance to, speak on that, and also to give us a few closing statements.
Okay, I can give a few closing statements here. Um, First of all, don't be afraid to come out. If you're a free thinker and it's safe to come out, be smart about it. Come out, do the right thing. Tell people who you are. Be proud of who you are. And if you are out, just don't come out. Let's do something for the community. Let's work along to improve the community. Let's get involved in politics. Let's get involved on the school boards. Let's do things that can move our country as well as our community further ahead. It's truly the leaders of this country, in my opinion, in my biased opinion, we're from the secular community. So let's just continue that great wealth of leadership into this 21st century.
Excellent, excellent. And Reginald?
I can't say much else on that because as it stands right now, if we don't get involved, we have no right to complain when things aren't going well. If you weren't there, what do you have to say? And I think that's the
Exactly.
best thing for getting involved.
Exactly, exactly. And, I am imploring everybody to go get registered to vote. We are coming upon the midterm of 2014. You saw what happened in 2010. And, the radical Republicans, the radical Tea Partiers, libertarians, they have the opportunity to sweep more offices, especially in the Senate, and then they will control the House and the Senate. And we just want you to get out here to vote. We're not telling you who to vote for. We're not telling you who not to vote for. That is not what we're trying to do. But what I'm just trying to say to you is pay attention to what's happening. Listen to what these people are trying to implement. It matters. It definitely matters. So again, just get out here, get an understanding, get involved. Part of getting involved is registering to vote. I know Reggie as well as Frank, they speak at different engagements. Get involved in the community, get out there, let your face be known, let your name be known. Um, Interact with, people that are running for, election, contact people in your state legislatures. I mean, there is money out there that we can, try to get in terms of grants. It's just time to get involved. It's time to take a step forward. It's time to stand up. So with that, I want to say thank you so much for joining us. This is Black Skeptics Chicago. It's been a privilege and an honor to, be a part of this group and to work with these fine individuals. I'm just, I'm proud of them. I'm proud of the progress that we've made. I'm proud of what we've been able to do over the past couple of years. We have more projects coming up. We have a white linen party coming up in September, right, Frank? With Black Light.
That's right, Black Light Foundation. They're responsible. Their main goal is to help the veterans, the homeless veterans. Just real quick on that. 25% of our veterans that come home are homeless. Of the 25% of those veterans, 80% of those are African American. So I would look forward to everyone coming out there to support that at the end of August, August 30th, I believe is the date. And it will be posted out there on the meetup. And I would love to have that room completely full. Those veterans, even though you may not agree with the war, and a lot of the wars I don't agree with it either, they put their lives on the line. All they did, they was acting on an order, and they were just trying to do their job. The least thing we can do is try to support them when they come back to the United States.
Exactly, exactly. And, working with homeless people and homeless organizations, that's part of our national social justice outreach. So, we're collecting things like soap, bars of soap, liquid soap, towels, socks, undershirts, underwear, just things that we can give, these toothbrushes, things that we can help and we can hand out, because this is taking place in a number of cities, Los Angeles, Chicago, Houston, Milwaukee, Philadelphia, the DC area, and I have someone coming on board from Mississippi that's, wants to be a part of this. So, we're growing, we're expanding. So we need the donations. If you want to make a financial donation, you can. Our PayPal is people of color beyond faith at gmail.com. Again, that's people of color beyond faith at gmail.com. You can make a financial contribution, and you can send a physical contribution as well. That information is on the People of Color Beyond Faith Facebook page, and you'll see the Los Angeles address that you can send those donations to. We're looking for school supplies, backpacks, and things of that nature to give to children. We're even taking clothing and toys and things like that, because while many of us do not necessarily celebrate Christmas or any of those holidays, there are, people that still do. And I don't feel that any child should wake up on Christmas Day and not have anything. So we wanted to go and get some letters from the post office, a few, like maybe 3 per city, and fulfill, those wishes of those children and give them a little extra, just because we think they're special, and they are. And so again, we appreciate you. We appreciate your support, your words of encouragement, and again, we thank you for spending some time with us and being a part of our community here. And on that note, we are done with this broadcast. You all have a lovely weekend, okay? Thank you and take care.